Well, hey there, Chase Oaks. It's good to be with you. As you're here in this room at Legacy, or you're watching us online, or joining us from one of our campuses, it is great to be with you in week 2 of our series called Navigating Us, where we're looking at different connections in life and the challenges that come with finding those connections in a changing world. And each week of this series, Jeff introed us last week, but now moving forward, we're going to focus on a particular kind of relationship. Because whether it's spouse to spouse or parent to child or neighbor to neighbor, coworker to coworker, or what we'll be focusing on today, friend to friend, each type of relationship presents some unique challenges that are only getting trickier to navigate. A recent study by the Survey on American Life found that when it comes to friendship, less than half of men and about 4 out of 10 women would say that they are satisfied with their friendships. And yet you and I don't need research to tell us that. Experience tells us that depending on your life stage, depending on your story, friendship and navigating it is tricky, and it's only getting trickier. And to set us up for that and for today's message, I want to share about a recent navigational issue we ran into as a family. It was about a month ago, and we decided to take our first extended road trip as a family, and we have 3 young kids. The youngest is 5.5 years old, also known as the wild card in the scenario. But we decided it was time to go to the beaches of Alabama. We've been inspired by so many of you. Many of you have much younger kids than we do, many more kids than we do, and you've gone further different distances than we decided to, and I've been inspired by your courage. And so we decided to pack our kids up into the car and trek out for Fort Morgan, Alabama, which is just outside Gulf Shores. And the kids did great, by the way. They were troopers throughout the whole trip. But the challenge that we ran into was picking the route, because the fastest route that we could take involved an X factor at the end of it. There was a ferry at the end of the trip. In fact, let me pop up the map that we did. I know everyone loves maps, but this helps you kind of picture it a little bit. That we were going the south route there. Instead of avoiding the traffic of Mobile and coming in north and going through Gulf Shores, we could stick to the coastline and then take some bridges to Dauphin Island. And then from Dauphin Island, you could cut off the mouth of the bay, which is about an 8-mile journey on a ferry. And the ferry technically would save you about 45 minutes of time if it was working. Now, I'm not that foolish, so I know how ferries work, that there's little chance that you're just gonna pop on the ferry. So we knew that the ferry ran every 45 minutes, and so if we missed one of the ferries, it's like, hey, we could get out, could stretch our legs, get a snack, everything would be great. And so we decided to go down the southern route there. I plug it into Google Maps, and Google Maps is telling me I'm making great time. And as a dad, making great time feels great. There's just something in there. So we're making great time. I know we're gonna get there at about 3:30 in the afternoon on Dauphin Island. And looking back, I was so naive. I thought, we're gonna pull up right when that ferry is, and we'll pay our little toll. The ferry captain would tip his cap at us, usher us right on to the last spot of the ferry. We'd trek across it. We'd be in our condo by 4:30 tops. But as we're driving to Dauphin Island, we're going across the bridge and into the island itself, we're starting to notice that there's a lot of traffic because, it's a Saturday at the beach in July. And so as we're pulling in there, we still got there at 3:30, but there was this long line of cars that we kind of pulled ourselves into, and the ferry captain, instead of tipping his cap at us, said that the next available ferry would be at 6:30 in the evening, about 3 hours from the time that we had arrived. And the kicker with this was that you actually had to leave your car in the line in order to hold your spot. So you couldn't buy a reservation and then go and hang out around the island. And so I just automatically, I was like, well, there's no way with 3 young kids that we just did a 10-hour car drive. I'm not gonna sit in this line for 3 hours. So I just immediately bail, even though it's really sad because I could literally see our destination across the bay. It was 8 miles of ocean. That's where I wanted to go, but it's okay, I've gotta turn around. And in my mind, I thought, okay, we gotta go around the bay. At most, it's gonna be about an hour. And then I plugged it into Google Maps, and this is what it came up with on Google Maps. That it was a 2-hour and 16-minute detour around the bay. After a 10-hour plus drive already through pure beach traffic when we could literally have seen our destination just a few minutes away. Why do I bring this up? Well, partly because it's therapeutic. It's one of the benefits of my job. I get to do group processing, and you guys are captive, so thank you for indulging me with that. But I also bring it up because I think it's a good example about how in life there are so many so close yet so far moments that we come into. Moments where you feel like things are clicking and moving forward, everything's on track for the destination you want to get to, and then in a moment you hit a snag. And not only do you find that there's a detour that you now have to go to get to where you want to get to, you have less energy because of how close you thought you were at the moment. And I think while life is full of that, that is actually how many of our friendships feel as well. Like say you have a friend that you had grown close with and things are moving and shaking, and then all of a sudden you find out that that friend is gonna move. Or maybe we're the ones that need to do the moving, like we're graduating or we're off for a job or we're pursuing a dream of some kind. And it's hard because all of a sudden, again, the friendship that we had, while great, it's like, oh, I'm starting all over again. Or maybe it's not our location that changes, maybe it's the season that changes, where somebody gets married or becomes a parent. Like kids, we love you, but you change things. Like all of a sudden, poker nights turn into late night feedings. And when seasons change, friendship typically changes too. And that can be hard because it can feel like we're starting all over again. Or maybe in your story, and this can be so painful, but maybe in your story, you felt like you had been building up trust with somebody, where this was somebody that had your back, and then in a moment that really hurt, it's like they betrayed you in a big way. And it's like, oh man, I feel like I'm set back so far. Or rejection, where you weren't sure where you were at with maybe a friend or a friend circle, and you decided to put yourself out there in a big way. Maybe it was with a small group, and you decided to be vulnerable in a way, and that vulnerability wasn't reciprocated, and that could be so hard. David Brooks, he's an author that wrote a book called How to Know a Person. It's a great book. And he was on a podcast recently, and he shared that he believes we live in the most rejected period of time ever. He's a man that's in his 60s, and so one of the ways that he kind of argued his point was to say that when he was applying for college back in the day, it was like, literally you send out 1 or 2 applications, they welcome you with open arms, and it's easy to get in. And yet today, a lot of us are like, acceptance rates are super low. We're sending out lots of applications and not getting much back. Or job applications that a lot of us are sending out lots of things electronically, and we get those automated rejection emails one after one, and that's a lot of our experiences. Or maybe it's the online dating world, whatever it is, we live in a rejection-oriented time. And I think we carry a lot of that in when it comes to our friendships. That friendships can often feel fragile, where we keep people kind of at an arm's length or at surface level, not because we don't want the depth that comes with going deeper, but because like the ferry and being rejected at it, we're just tired and discouraged. We've tried this before, and it's hard to work up the energy again. And so I think for today's talk, what would be helpful is it'd be good to just name the challenges that you're facing in your friendship journey right now. Like, think about it. Like, based on your life stage, your current season of life, what is it that makes friendship challenging? Or think about your story and the past hurts and rejections and maybe things that you're bringing into the table with that. What is it that maybe you're carrying with you? It's like, hey, I just got to be honest, that makes it hard for me to move forward. My goal today is not to dismiss any of that or make light of it, but I think in light of those experiences and where we're currently at in those frustrations, friendship could often wind up being a concept that feels like something we luck into. Almost like, man, it's a roll of the dice. I kind of hope it happens, but I'm not really sure if I have much control over it. And to be sure, in life, there's lots of things that are not in our control, but not everything. And I'd like to argue for a few minutes today that when it comes to friendship, you and I are often more in control than we often think. That there are certain things that people who have deep relationships, deep friendships at different stages and seasons of their life pretty consistently, there are things that those people do and they keep doing on a regular basis. And those are things that you and I can do as well if we want to have great friendships. And so to highlight those things, I want to draw inspiration from a story in the Old Testament. This happened all the way back in 605 BC. And it is a story about a powerful group of friends, an inspiring group of friends that I think will help us navigate our world of friendship today as well. And the text gives us the backstory. So if you have your Bibles, you have the Bible app, you just want to follow along with me on the screen, we're going to be in Daniel chapter 1, where we meet this group of friends in a moment. But at first, the text is actually going to set the context and the scenario that we find this group of friends in with. So starting in verse 1, this is what it says. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put them in the treasure house of his God. So a quick history lesson real quick before I move forward. King Nebuchadnezzar is a famous king from history. Many of us maybe read about him in our history classes and textbooks. He built one of the largest ancient Near East empires, the Babylonian Empire. The capital city, Babylon, was located in what is now modern-day Iraq. A fun fact that, just as I was researching this, I found this interesting, maybe you won't, I don't know, is that Saddam Hussein, who had been dictator of Iraq for many, many years, actually modeled himself after Nebuchadnezzar. Like he would put up murals, you can look this up online, murals that would have Nebuchadnezzar's image and his image next to it. He actually tried to reconstruct the historical Babylon city. He really wanted to be Nebuchadnezzar, which is kind of creepy, but that was his vibe. But with that, the real Nebuchadnezzar, who started it all, lived in that area, and he was wanting to expand his empire. And the text lets us know is that as Nebuchadnezzar was expanding his empire, had his sights set on Israel, that God was actually in control the entire time. Like an Old Testament history, quick lesson is that, God was working through the people of Israel. It was how he wanted to reveal himself to the world. He loved the whole world. He says, I want to use this people group to reveal who I am. And yet this people group, like all of us, they struggled to obey God, and they would actually start to worship different gods, worship different idols, even though they knew the one true God. And so God's like, hey, I love you, and I'm never going to forsake you, but there are consequences to that sin, to those issues, especially how repetitious they were. And one of the consequences was that he said, I'm going to allow a foreign power to come in, and you're going to go into exile. And so that's what's starting here, is that Nebuchadnezzar is coming in to do that. And as he comes in to defeat the city of Jerusalem, he actually takes some stuff from the temple of God, the temple that Solomon had built for God. But along with taking stuff from the temple, he also takes people from Jerusalem as well. This is what it says as we continue on. Then the king, Nebuchadnezzar, ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. Young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. So when Nebuchadnezzar would take over a country, he had a shrewd strategy. That instead of enslaving everybody or destroying everything, he would actually say, hey, I'm gonna get the best and the brightest. I'm gonna get the prettiest people and the most powerful people. I'm gonna get Harvard meets Hollywood, and I'm gonna grab them all together, and I'm gonna take them back to Babylon. And it wasn't to torture them or anything. He had a specific plan. This is what he would do when they brought him back. He ordered his chief court official, the chief court official, was to teach them, the captives, the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. Basically, he's like, I want to give you a 3-year, all expenses paid, free room and board and tuition program experience. And we're not just talking about like free board, like dorm room food. We're saying straight from the king's table, we're going to give you the whole palace, and you're going to be in the seat of power. And I want us to put ourselves in the position of these captives at that moment. Because I guarantee you, none of them wanted to have been taken from their home. But think, as they're on this journey and they're going into this strange world, and they know that they've been taken captive, they probably had images in their mind of like, I'm gonna be lugging heavy rocks up a hill for like the rest of my life, wasting away. And then they find out that actually, no, you've been selected to be with the prettiest and the most powerful people. We're gonna put you at the seat of power in the palace, and you're gonna have access to everything. They must have thought that they won the lottery. But there was a catch with this program. That as Nebuchadnezzar would put people in this training situation, his goal was to strip away their identity so that they would become pro-Babylon and they'd be cheerleaders for everything that the empire was doing. And whether they stayed in Babylon for the rest of their lives, and this was like the most wealthy and powerful city in the whole world, or if maybe they got a chance to go back home, that he would hope that they would be kind of advocates for the empire itself. And so it's in this context that we meet this friend group. And this friend group was in the middle of this. In fact, we find out that they were selected to be in the gifted and talented program themselves. And this is the friend group. Among those who were chosen from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief court official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. So this group of friends, they were the best and the brightest. They had been brought into Babylon. They were in this program already, and the acculturation process has already begun because their names are already being changed. I mean, last week, if you were here, Jeff was talking about how he was hoping to get Jeff back into the top 10 baby names. Do you remember that? Good luck with that. I mean, seriously. I don't think Belteshazzar is going to make our top 10 anytime soon. But back then, that was a pretty hot name, because that name was connected to one of the Babylonian gods. Like Bel was one of their gods, and translated, it probably meant something like Bel is my defender, or Bel will take care of me. We also meet his other three friends in this friend group, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If you grew up in Sunday school, you've probably heard of them, this friend group and their story. In our household, we're in the VeggieTales stage, so it's Rack, Shack, and Benny in our household. But this is a famous friend group, and yet we meet them at a pivotal moment in their life. I mean, I doubt any of them liked the idea or fully accepted the idea that their names were being changed. And yet in the text, it doesn't give us any hint that they thought this too much, almost like they decided, you know what, I'm just not gonna worry about it. They were navigating, much like you and I are today, they were navigating a tricky cultural situation, and as they navigated it, they made a decision to say, okay, we're not gonna worry about some things, we're just gonna try to be faithful, but there's other things that we will worry about. And this is one of the things that Daniel decided to worry about in the program. Continuing on. But Daniel resolved, that's a great phrase, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. There's some different theories about why is it that Daniel had such a problem with the food and the wine. Like some people would think that, hey, he knew that this food had been offered to some of the gods of Babylon. So he's like, hey, I'm just not comfortable in taking it. Other people think that, hey, perhaps like he knew that this food would violate the dietary restrictions that people in the Old Testament had to follow, kosher diet, that we're not under those restrictions anymore, but back then they were. So maybe he was worried about violating that restriction. I personally think that he just decided, you know what, there was a point to put a stake in the ground in this program to say, you know what, I need to show that it's not Babylon that's in control. It's not this training program that's in control. It's not Nebuchadnezzar who's in power over everything. It's God. And I'm going to make a very tangible display that it is God who is in control. Whatever the reason was, this was the point where he decided to draw a line in the sand and say, this is as far as I'm willing to go. And it's at this point that I want us to pay special attention to how Daniel's friends start to get involved. Because as Daniel is showing this resolve, he actually makes an assumption about the fact that they're gonna be with him. Let's check this out. Daniel said to the guard whom the chief had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, he says, please test your servants for 10 days. There's a test because, this guard was like, hey, I'm in charge of your health, and if you stop eating all this good food, I'm gonna get in trouble because you're gonna look like nothing and you're gonna be good for nothing. And they didn't wanna do that. And so Daniel's like, hey, test me, let's try it. But it's not just test me, notice this, it's test us. Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. And then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. that this friend group was so tight, so aligned, that Daniel knew that if he was taking a stand, that his guys were going to be taking a stand right there with him the entire time. It's like, bro, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. Now, this may show a little bit about my spiritual maturity, but the first image that popped into my head was actually this one, where it's like these guys are tight, you know? They are tight. Yes, we got to clap so they're in the corner for Backstreet Boys. Child of the 90s right here. Doesn't get any tougher than that. I mean, actually, it probably gets a lot tougher than that group. But I mean, in my head, again, I'm like, okay, these guys, they are locked in step with each other. They're like, we are here to do something together. You are like my bros, we are in this fight with one another, and you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. And it's in that resolve with this group that God shows up. And this is what happens. So this is the guard, he agreed to this, to test them, and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, this friend group, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and wine that they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. Basically like, hey, do your thing. Like if that's what you want, like go and do your thing, honor your God. And to these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. That this was a special group of friends. That yes, certainly God was up to something miraculous with them, and that wouldn't just be here, it would continue on. Like this group of friends would go through a lot. Like after Nebuchadnezzar saw all that had happened with them and how God had clearly blessed them, he moves them up into positions of great power and great influence, only to later get frustrated with them when they won't worship him and kind of conform to all the different stuff in the Babylonian culture. Some of us are familiar with the fiery furnace where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, again, this friend group, they refuse to worship Nebuchadnezzar as God. And so they get thrown into a fiery furnace, and God miraculously shows up and protects them in that. But what I love about that story is not necessarily the miracle itself, which is powerful. But in that story, right before they're about to get thrown into the fiery furnace, I love what this friend group does because it shows their resolve. That they say, you know what, Nebuchadnezzar, if you want to throw us into that fiery furnace, we believe that God has the ability to save us. But even if he chooses not to, we will not worship you because you are not the one true God. That's resolve. And that's what this group shows together, and it's powerful. Like if you're like me and you think of your world today, like I want a friendship circle like that in my life. Like I don't necessarily want the acculturation, definitely not the fiery furnace thing, but I want that resolve and that closeness. And I think it begs a question that you and I need to answer. And that is, well, how did they get so close? Like what was it about this friend group that led to that point where they were able to do this big thing together? And I think the text gives us some hints about this that we have to piece together, and also a little bit of speculation as well. But I want to think about this because I think it'll help you and I as we approach our friendships today. Like we know this friends circle was full of young guys. Like we knew that they were somewhere between 13 and 17 years old when they were taken from Jerusalem, which is pretty young. We also know that they were in the best and the brightest, the gifted and talented program throughout the whole thing. So my personal theory, this is just pure speculation, but I believe that before they were taken from Jerusalem, that these guys were rivals. It's like that they're all fighting to be the best in their class or to be the valedictorian or to be the quarterback or fighting over girls, because it's like they're the cream of the crop in this group. But whether that's true or not, at some point they were taken from Jerusalem to Babylon. And that was a hard journey. In fact, I love maps today. I'm gonna show you another map up here of the journey that they needed to do. This journey that took them from Jerusalem to Babylon was an 1,000-mile journey that would have taken likely 4 to 5 months on foot, and it would have been difficult. And just to be clear, this journey was a detour in their life, even stronger than a detour. I mean, nobody in this group had it in their plans to say, we're gonna be taken from our home, all of our dreams are dashed, and we're gonna be pulled into a foreign culture. that they had no hope of returning. And yet I believe it was this journey here, this difficult one, that cemented in these relationships and these bonds in a powerful way. Like you and I today, we can often, at least I can, we can look at other friend circles in our life and want what they have without realizing all that they had to go through to get there. Like one of my favorite stories, it's one of my favorite TV shows. It's on Netflix right now. It's Band of Brothers, which is a gritty retelling of what happened during World War II. So it's not for kids, but with that, it's based on the true story of Easy Company, which is a group of soldiers who fought in World War II. And it was a group of paratroopers who were sent into the European campaign, and it follows them throughout, this show follows them throughout their journey. And in that show, and it's based off of, again, what a soldier had told a biographer, in that show, one of the soldiers remarks, he's like, why is it always that it's Easy Company that's on the front of the line? Or why is it that Easy Company is always the one that's to go in first when there's an enemy city that needs to be attacked? Or why is it that Easy is the first one to drop into enemy-surrounded territory? They were a group of paratroopers, so this was a relatively new concept. So they would jump out of an airplane into an area where they knew that enemy was all around them. And Easy Company was the one to do this the most. And yet, as biographers looked at their story and talked to these different guys, they remarked that Easy Company, while they went through the most stuff during the war, had an unusually close bond even for soldiers. And so some of us, I think, are waiting for the perfect season for friendship to happen. We're waiting for the perfect time to deepen our connections. I think what Daniel would say to us is there is no perfect season. And that it's often life's imperfections, the imperfections of our current season and stage of life, whether it's the toughness of being a young parent or a health crisis or something we're going through or moving into a new city, or it's the imperfections of our story, the struggles we've had, the hurts that we have. Those are the things that are often the most connective things about us. It was for Daniel. And so my question for you and I is there something that seems like a detour or a difficulty in your life right now that could actually lead to something defining? Including a defining group of friends, people who shape a season or longer in our lives. And that was Daniel's experience, but it didn't just happen. And this brings me to the part I want to focus on where you and I have agency, you and I have control. Because even though Daniel and his friends went on this detour, it was longer than a detour, this 1,000-mile journey that they didn't know, the bonding took something from them, because this is just a principle that is true all across the board, that definitive friendships require definition. And this is where you and I have control, because you and I need to bring clarity to the different connections in our life, and it's what Daniel was able to do in his world. And I think he does this in 3 ways. I'd like to highlight them for him, because again, I think these are things you and I can implement right now in our life if we're willing to do it. And the first thing that takes for definitive friendship is definitive values. That Daniel had clearly pre-decided who he wanted to be in the season he was about to enter into. It's almost as he looked, he's like, I'm about to go into this strange world of Babylon. And instead of just totally pulling back, he had made a decision about how he wanted to engage and be present and purposeful in that moment. He's actually one of the Bible's best examples of faithful engagement, where he did the hard work of saying, okay, instead of just totally going into fight or flight mode, I'm actually going to do the hard work to evaluate how I'm going to engage, what decisions I'm going to make, where I'm going to say yes to, what I'm going to say no to. And he had made that decision before he entered into the season. And that's important for you and I to do too, especially when it comes to friendship. Aristotle, who was a philosopher that lived about 300 years after Daniel did, he observed that there were 3 different types of friendship in our life. He said there are some friendships that are based on utility. These are, think of like a work relationship. These are where we're useful to each other. It's like, you do this for me, I do this for you. And that's a great way to build a friendship. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. He also said that there are some friendships that are based on pleasure, where we form connections and friendships around common hobbies that we like or similar interests. Again, those are great. Nothing wrong with that. Those are actually pretty helpful. But what he observed is, he said, the most stable, but also the most rare types of friendships that we can have are those that are values-based friendships. That those are the ones that define us, that have the ability to carry through us through different seasons of our life, because those are relationships that are based on common character and how we want to grow and journey together during a season. And so if you and I want to find values-based friendships, we have to define our values. And I think it's something we got to do every season of our life, to say, okay, as I enter into this stage as a young parent, as I move into this new city and this new situation, as I start this new job, or maybe I'm an empty nester right now, that like Daniel, we need to take a moment to say, okay, as I think about this season, how do I want to live it? How do I want to journey it? What do I value, so that by the end of that season, I can look back and be glad about who I was in that season? And as we define those values for ourselves, we then look for people who are journeying in the same direction. Because other people would love to define our values for us. Other people in our culture would love to define our values for us. It starts first with us saying, okay, this is who I want to be. And then we look for those people that are journeying in the same direction. And when we do, again, friendship doesn't just happen. We actually need to do something. That's the second part. We need to have a definitive conversation. Like Daniel had clearly talked with his buddies about how they were going to stick together in Babylon. I think they had it at multiple times where they're on this journey, this 4 to 5 month journey, and they're like, guys, this is crazy. I can't believe all that we're about to run into here. How do we want to do this together? They probably talked about different scenarios with one another, that by the time they got into Babylon, I think they kind of had an idea. And I think that those conversations had happened before Daniel had to show his resolve to that chief court official. And the reason why I think I know that is that when Daniel showed his resolve, he knew his guys were going to be with them. There wasn't a guy afterwards that's like, you committed us to what? Like, you're going to give up like the filet mignon for celery? There was none of that confusion because they had clearly talked about it in the moment. It reminds me back in college, I joined a Christian fraternity, which sounds a little like an oxymoron at first. And honestly, admittedly, when I first heard about the concept, I was like, hey, that sounds a little cheesy. Like, I'm not sure if I really want to do that. I don't really know if I buy into all that stuff. I never thought of myself as a fraternity kind of guy. And yet, I had met some of the guys, and I was intrigued. And it wound up being the best decision I made in college. In fact, a few years ago, Amy and I were able to go back and visit where we went to school. We both went to UCLA. Any UCLA people out there? Okay, that was... if you ever go to a UCLA football game, that's about the level of our fandom, I gotta tell you. It's not A&M level. Whoop, okay. It's we try. Troy Aikman went to our school, so we got that going for us, but UCLA, go Bruins. So we were able to visit back there, and I found the house because we lived in a house, like our fraternity had a house that we all lived together, and I went up there, and I was able to snap a picture of my pledge class, and here's the picture of the guys that we were in. There's me in the top side, so young, so full of life, so many dreams ahead of us. But it was this group of guys that we had stuck together. And I gotta tell you, what made it so powerful was that we had all made a commitment together about how we wanted to journey through college. And it wasn't just a commitment, like we had conversations about, like there was a pledge process, there was different commitments and expectations, and all of that led into the fact that by the end of our college career, we all wanted to be able to say we journeyed well, and this group really helped me do that. Definitive friendships require definitive conversations where somebody takes a risk, and it is a risk, to say, I'm gonna step out and I'm actually gonna say, hey, I like this connection, man, it's cool that we hang out at work, or I like that we do this hobby together, but hey, I actually want this to be a values-based friendship. Like, what would it look like for us to commit to grow together and actually to make this a little bit more formal? And I gotta tell you, when a group of friends does this, or when a small group does this, it is defining. And the groups that miss out on this step, that's where sometimes the group experience can be a little lackluster. It's because we haven't really had that conversation to say, what is it that we're trying to do together? And so let me encourage you to have those conversations with people that you feel like are values-based friendships, because it'll revolutionize your connection. The last thing we see that Daniel does in this moment that I think we can do as well is that defining friendships require definitive opportunities. Definitive opportunities. What I love about Daniel's group is that they were super open to all that God was up to in that moment. Like again, I mentioned earlier, it would be so easy. I would be tempted to go into full-on hunker down rejection mode. But for them, they looked at their scenario as an opportunity where God was at work in the middle of it and that they didn't want to miss it. And in fact, they wanted to rise up and meet that moment and say, okay, God's going to do something in here. And he did. Like we are still talking about this group of teenagers who impacted an empire. Like if you're a teenager today, like let that sink in for a moment, that your age doesn't define you. It's like, man, there is something that if we meet the moment with what God's up to, like we can change the world because it's happened before and it'll happen again. But we have to be open. The best friendship circles are not cliques. And I think we know this from experience. Like nobody wants to be a part of a clique, and yet they can kind of get that way. But instead, the best friendship circles are those that are outward focused. And it's in their openness, in a strange way, that God actually draws those relationships and those connections closer together in a powerful way. Our cultural moment is different than what it was for Daniel's. Like we're not facing the same challenges that he is, but we do have significant opportunities that our friend circles can either rise up and meet together, or we can not and miss out on so much. I mean, last week, Jeff talked about how, bonding relationships happen over shared mission. I'd love to focus on a particular aspect of that mission that you and I have together in a particular moment that I think our culture is presenting us. And that is what I talked about at the beginning of this talk, that we live in the most rejected period of time ever. And so what would it look like for you and I, for our friend groups to rise up and meet that moment? And this is personal to me because back when I was in high school, somebody did this for me in a powerful way. Two of my best friends today started back in high school. My buddies Ash and Danny were already best friends before I even had a chance to really connect with them. And if you had talked to them at that point, these two guys would have said that they were doing just fine. Like life was going great. But I wasn't doing fine. Like I was lonely and struggling with that. In fact, I remember during this season of my life, I prayed to God, and my prayer was what I thought would be the solution to that prayer. I said, God, would you please bring me a girlfriend? And I think God has a sense of humor because the way he answered that prayer was with two dudes instead. And I said, you know what, God, I don't think you understood the prayer. Maybe I need to say it a few more times over. And you know what he said back, I think, is he's like, I did understand the prayer. And this is what you needed. And these two guys changed my life. But the way that they changed my life was that they had to take a step of openness. And openness in our friend circle looked like opening the door to Ash's car. Ash drove a 1990 Geo Prism hatchback. In fact, I have a picture of this car up here. Now, his wasn't as classy as this one is. But I remember he opened that door and they invited me into their friend circle for a lunch that turning into an invitation to the youth group, that turned into lots of drives around our city in that car, lots of memories that were formed together. And it was in that car that my life and my world transformed, where suddenly I found some purpose, and I think our friend circle actually got stronger as a result of the three of us together. But it all started with an open invitation. I would never have predicted, if you were asking me about my life's journey, that the transformative part of it would involve a Geo Prism. And yet it does. And that's what you and I have the opportunity to do as well. Because I think in our circles, especially if you're at a place in life where you feel like you've actually got some good friends, where you feel really well connected right now, it's so easy to kind of, because of our journey in the past, it's easy for us to kind of get into hunker down mode, where we start to say, it's almost like a scarcity mentality, where it's like there's only so much friendship to go around and I don't really want to mess this up. But in the moment, I think with what God is inviting you and I to do in our friend circles is to say, if we meet this significant opportunity of rejection in our culture with openness, if we're a projection of the grace and love and acceptance that Jesus offers us, it can be defining. And you may be thinking right now with your life or your friend circle that you don't have a lot to offer, that it's just a Geo Prism. But I think actually what you have, what you and I have, is a lot more than we think. And that by opening up the door to our life, it can be defining not only for the person that's invited in, but actually defining for the group that we're in and life-giving. And so as we close today, I think every season of our life is a fresh opportunity to redefine what friendship looks like for us. And sometimes that starts with defining who we are and finding some new friends that are maybe in the same lane, the same values part that we have. It's like, okay, I just need to find some friends. Maybe by redefining, we actually need to refine some of our friend circles to say, guys, hey, if I'm honest, we just don't have a lot of purpose here. I'd love to bring some purpose in this. Or guys, if I'm honest, this has gotten a little cliquish, and I want to open up our doors into that. Wherever you're at with that, I would love for us to steal a phrase from Daniel and to say, what would it look like for you and I to show some relational resolve this week? That could be resolving to put yourself out there again and join a small group, even though it's not comfortable, but because you know that's a way for you to find values-based friends. Maybe it's joining established, like one of your hosts talked about today. It's a great way to get started to meet some people. Maybe it's resolving to make a tough conversation to bring purpose in life, or maybe it's resolving to invite somebody in. And whatever it is that's with that, let's resolve to relate like Jesus did, who didn't look at us with rejection, but opened up his arms in acceptance and grace. That's the message he has for all of us. And the privilege we get to have as we relate, particularly as we friend with other people, is to reflect that to a rejection-oriented world. Would you pray with me? Father, thank you for this chance that we get to gather as a group of people, and we pray, Father, for connection, that we would, in our connections, be a reflection of who you are, and part of that is through your grace and acceptance and your love. And Father, I pray for relational courage for all of us. The friendship is hard, especially in our world today. Would you give us resolve, like Daniel, to be able to step out again, work up the energy again, to either put ourselves out there or deepen a connection that you've placed in our lives. We love you, and it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.